What's up, guys? Ben Pollack here, and today we are talking about a concept that came up on one of my Instagram videos lately. If you've been following me on Instagram, you know I recently posted a video showing the aftermath of supersetting sets of 20 on leg extension with sets of 10 on squat. It was an interesting experience, challenging to say the least. But one of the comments I got was, why are you supersetting those? Why didn't you just do your squats and then your leg extensions? I think the stimulus to fatigue ratio would be better in that circumstance. And I kind of gave this guy a hard time because, stimulus to fatigue ratio doesn't actually mean anything if you think about it. You could do one-arm cable curls, right? And the fatigue is 0, and presumably you have some stimulus, and so your ratio is infinity. So I said, I think if you're concerned about those types of things, you're barking up the wrong tree. And he responded, well, but you could use a higher relative intensity if you're not supersetting, right? And that's true. That was a great point. And if you've gone through the Unfuck Your Program course, you know this. Relative intensity is important when you're choosing weight selection to make sure that you're not overreaching or underreaching on any given day. However, you guys know I'm all about finding what works for you, and a lot of finding what works for you is putting your training into context, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about today, the context between relative intensity and your training goals. So first, let's look at the simple case, right? We're going to look at strictly powerlifting goals. And relative intensity, when defined from a powerlifting perspective, or just intensity from a powerlifting perspective, is the percentage of the weight that you're using as relative to your 1 rep maximum, okay? So if I have 300 pounds on the bar and my 1 rep max is 400, then my intensity is 75%. And that's a useful measure in a powerlifting context because we know from the theory of periodization that over time, to be successful and to make continued progress, we must increase training intensity as a percentage of a 1 rep max and decrease training volume. Lots and lots of academic research has shown that when you do this, you're going to get stronger over the long term. And this is explained in more detail in Unfuck Your Program. That is strictly from a strength perspective, all right? When we look at bodybuilding, it's a different story, all right? When you look at bodybuilding, intensity to me is more well-defined, more usefully defined as a relative effort, a measure of relative effort. How close are you to pushing to absolute muscular failure? And the reason for that is, just like we have periodization that shows, hey, this is the model by which we get stronger, we have a lot of research that indicates the best situation, the most likely situation to trigger muscle protein synthesis, muscle growth, is when you're pushing closer to muscular failure, okay? So our definitions of intensity vary according to context and according to our goals. Or I guess you could say according to the context created by our goals. So let's go back to the Instagram question now that we know how we're going to define intensity for different goals. All right, right now my goal is to add muscle. I'm not so much concerned about adding strength as I gain muscle because, I'm pretty confident that whatever muscle I do add, I'm going to be able to convert that. I'm going to be able to realize strength from that down the road. But I think if I try and do both at the same time, it's going to be more difficult, right? So I'm choosing one goal at a time. And if my goal is gaining muscle, then I know that I'm trying to push hard, trying to push close to failure, right? So here's why these definitions explain what I was doing. Let's imagine that I had 75% of my 1 rep max on the bar, and I was going to do a set of max squats with that, right? Trying to push as close to muscular failure as possible. That means I'm going to have 600 pounds on the bar, and I'm going to shoot, let's say, 6 to 8 reps. I can tell y'all for a fact that if I try to squat 600 for 6 to 8, I could probably do it. I would probably not be able to get out of bed for a few days, probably not walk right for about a week. And if I tried to come back the next week and try to do 610 for 10 or for 6 to 8, I probably wouldn't be able to do it, or maybe I'd get hurt, right? So I've kind of reached the limit of my ability to push to failure on a regular basis and still be able to get stronger, still be able to train progressively. So that's why I superset the leg extensions, right? So I do the leg extensions first. Well, now I can reach muscular failure using 500 pounds. The absolute weight on the bar is a lot less, but I'm able to get very close to muscular failure, and I'm really frying my quads more than, say, also my low back and my hips and my knees or whatever else the case may be. I do not believe this is a good strategy for someone who is not at the same absolute levels of strength as I am at, right? If your 1 rep max squat is 400, well, guess what? You probably can put 300 pounds on the bar and squat 6 to 8 and not be crippled. And you probably can come back the next week and squat 310 for 6 to 8 and still be okay. And you can probably keep that up for a while. And if you then periodize your training, so eventually you're going to go down to sets of 5, you can do it for even longer, right? Even when you're pushing close to maximum failure, close to muscular failure, excuse me, with near maximal weights. So this is kind of where the measure of absolute strength also matters when you're dealing with concepts like relative intensity. Okay. I know this was a little bit convoluted. It is a complicated topic. I personally think much better when I'm writing, so I have included an article linked in the description below that's up on Elite FTS that I think explains things a little bit more clearly. If you didn't quite follow anything, if it sounds like I screwed something up, please read the article, right? Because I would prefer you guys go by that as opposed to some snafu I may have made while talking, because it can be hard for me to keep things straight in my brain sometimes. But this was a very good question. It's what a teacher might call a learning opportunity. But I do hope you guys found this video useful, and if so, I will continue to keep making them. All right, till next time, think strong, train hard.